Mic check, mic check. Check the microphone. Mic check, mic check. Hold up. We good to go. Hmm. First of all, good evening and welcome to another episode of the P.Ave Perspective. I'm your host, Mr. O'Neill, and whether you're watching the actual live stream or whether you're watching the replay video that I post on YouTube, I appreciate you tuning in this week. But tonight, as usual, we're going to discuss something that affects every neighborhood, every family, every church, every school, and every business. It affects everything. And that is the mindset. The mindset. Let me turn this down. But like I said, that is the mindset. Not politics, not race, not money, the mindset. And the title of this episode is Changing the Mindset, Rebuilding Our Communities from the Inside Out. And before we get into the topic, I want to read a scripture. I don't try to be too religious, but I ended up reading a scripture that fits this episode. So I wanted to share that with y'all at first. And the scripture is Romans 12:2. And it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But as usual, it's a discussion. So I want to ask a question off top. And the question is, can a community truly change if the mindset of its people never changes? And I want to know how y'all feel about that. Can a community really change if the mindset of the people never changes? But also to kick off the discussion, think about this. Think about this. Because we've heard people talk about reparations. That's a big topic in the Black community based on past events or whatever. So I wanted to frame this question. If they decided to give reparations to every Black family, we're just going to say in the hood, if they gave $1 million to every Black family in the neighborhood tonight, if they gave everybody received $1 million in their bank account tonight for reparations, 10 years from now, do you think that neighborhood would still face the same problems that it faces today? That's what I want to know. Type yes or no in the comments and tell me why. You agree, or tell me, you know what I'm saying, do you feel like it would change or it would stay the same? Let me know, let me know, let me know. But as always, nothing I discuss is about blaming anyone, but it's about honestly asking what helps communities thrive, what keeps communities stuck, and what can each of us do about it? Those are key questions that we need to answer. And like I said, I'm going to try to answer some of them tonight on this live stream. But no matter what, we always discuss history in dealing with our current situation. And history matters. History does matters. But what matters more importantly is what we choose to do next. And some people say history doesn't matter. Others say history explains everything. But I believe the truth is way more complex than that. History matters in the sense that it shapes opportunities, it institutions and communities. But history does not eliminate our ability to make choices today. It don't, we can blame everything on history and we can say how our people were treated, how we were treated, and we can talk about that, 1,000 times. But I'm a accountability person, and history does not, like I said, change, or it does not really affect the choices that we make today. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. It does, but it shouldn't. And I'm gonna give you a few examples. After slavery ended, many Black Americans, because we were turned away from everything that were owned by other people, and we were basically left on our own, Black Americans built their own schools, they built their own churches, they started and built their own businesses, they built newspapers, they colleges, and they did all of this while facing enormous barriers, fresh out of slavery, no ownership, no resources, no nothing. And like, I wasn't back then, but I can imagine, a child being kicked out of their parents' home and just told, okay, you have to get out, and you have to get out there and figure it out. But they figured it out. They figured it out. And just like I said, eventually they thrived. They thrived, and they went from, owning nothing, no resources, to establishing basically everything they needed. Because the people that, had the, freedom, they wasn't really trying to do nothing for them, especially people in the South. They had to go through hatred for them, gaining their freedom. They had to go through a continuous oppression, continuous persecution. Like, we read the stories. We read the stories of what the free Blacks who stayed in the South had to go through. But yet and still, these people established their own towns. They established, like I said, their own schools, their own businesses. They established everything they need to not only survive, but to thrive. And we have to ask the question, how did people with so few resources still build so much? That's a major question. And just like I said, in doing this research, like, I've been researching this forever. And like I said, when you ask that question, you tend to get answers like, resilience, faith, education, gaining an education, entrepreneurship, and just as importantly, community support, supporting each other, working together. Because if we didn't have anything else back then, we had each other. And another example, throughout the civil rights movement, thousands of ordinary people organized, sacrificed, and worked together toward a common goal, which was gaining civil rights. And again, like, what values made this collective action possible? What values enable them, to come together, unify, and work together to push towards gaining civil rights? When you talk about that, the values, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, we'll say courage, discipline, shared purpose, leadership. All of these things played a part in that. But again, how do they pull it off? Imagine that. And I ask these questions and I touch on this because when you look at us today, I feel like we have way more opportunities. We have, way more resources. Like, there are more black millionaires, black billionaires in the world today than there ever was. We have access to education, free education. We have access to jobs. We have access to capital to start our own businesses. We have so much more now today than they ever had. But it seems like we as a community are doing so much less. We are accomplishing so much less than they accomplished with so little. And like I said, that's the key to what I'm discussing here today, the mindset. But again, what positive values from older generations that they had that we're lacking? I need to know. I need y'all to talk to me. Let me know something. Let me know something. But I'll discuss a few of the values that I feel like made it possible for them to accomplish what they accomplished. And also, the lack of these values is what's hindering us from accomplishing more. Because let's keep it real. The bar that they set back then, with everything that they accomplished back then, I feel like future generations, my generations, you know what I'm saying? I was born in the 70s, raised in the 80s and 90s. But I feel like we dropped the ball. If we really look at everything they accomplished in their time after slavery and through the civil rights movement, they accomplished so much with so little. And like I said, they left, the blueprint. They left the blueprint. You know what I'm saying? We see all the leaders. We see the Malcolm X's, the Marcus Garveys, the Martin Luther Kings, all the different, organizations. Like, they laid the blueprint for us. And I feel like we as the next generation, we were supposed to take that and run with it. We were supposed to take the foundation that they laid and continue building on it. But we dropped the ball. And like I said, I had to look back and see where we dropped the ball. How did we drop the ball? How did we not, take the handoff and run with it? And like I said, it starts with the mindset. It starts with the mindset. And just like I said, I had to look at the fact that there was a set of morals and there was a set of values that they lived by that didn't get passed down to us. It didn't get passed down to us. And like I said, there's a million reasons. There's a million reasons. And like, I was talking to my uncle today, and he actually posed me the question, like, how did we drop the ball? How did we drop the ball? And like I always say, one of the main things I speak on as far as us as a people and how we dropped the ball was the crack cocaine epidemic. Because like I always say, when I talk about subject and I talk about my past and me growing up, like, I can still remember in the early 70s, I can still remember a strong black street boy. I can still remember, women in my family, men in my family that own their own business. I remember, black people owning farms, raising their own food, growing their own food, thriving in business. I still remember all of that. And like I said, it slowly but surely, it was destroyed. And it was destroyed, by a couple of different factors. But the key thing was us. The key deciding factor on the failure of everything was us. And again, our mindset. Our mindset. And just like I talk to people all the time, I talk about the lost generation. I talk about the crack cocaine epidemic. And I talk about, like, we know now that the government pushed crack cocaine into the black communities. We know that now. That information is out there. But like I like to remind people, when you truly take accountability, because I took part in that too. I took part in selling drugs. I took part in the gang banging. I took part in all that. But when you start to really look within and start to take accountability, I had to realize that I didn't have to do that. At the time, I made every excuse, but I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to, because there were people in my past who made different choices, made different decisions. And just like I said, it starts with the mindset. But I want to go over a couple of the values that I think that the older generation had that didn't get passed down to us. And it's part of the reason why we failed so far, and we're failing, at a continuous rate now. But one of those values was collectivism. And for those who don't know, collectivism is the practice or principle of giving a group priority over each individual in that group. Group thinking, group action. Those people back then, they weren't thinking about themselves as individuals more so than they were thinking about the collective as a whole. And just like I said, if those people had been selfish and just thinking about them, I don't think they would have been able to come together and accomplish the group goals or goals for the people that they were able to accomplish. So collectivism, that's one of the balls that we dropped. And like I said, during the crack cocaine epidemic, like I was talking to my uncle earlier, I remember us getting to the point where once we started getting money, we got more divided. At first it was, we were divided by, streets. Next, we were divided by neighborhoods. And it was all a part of the greed that getting money and stuff like that, made us start to think. It made us start to feel, and it made us start to act different towards each other. The greed, really separated us. And it took everybody from the collective that it was before to the greedy mindset, to, I got to get all I can get. And like I said, as a whole, it wasn't everybody. It wasn't everybody, because I'll admit, even though I was doing wrong, I always had the group mentality. I always had the team mentality or the family mentality, because that's how I was raised and that's how I was schooled, to look out, for your people. So, but I also know that it got to the point where we started like, okay, this person can't come over here and make no money, and this person can't do this, to the point where, and I saw, like I said, I've seen brothers fall out. I've seen brothers literally, set each other up to get robbed, all kind of stuff out of greed. And like I said, that collectivism, it started being, dismantled. It was destroyed. But another, is self-determination. Self-determination is the process by which a group of people, usually possessing a certain degree of national consciousness, form their own state and choose their own government. And like I said, we're not on that nowadays. We're not on that nowadays. But national consciousness, a group of people usually possessing a certain degree of national consciousness form their own state and choose their own government. Like, that's what helped get them to where they were. They knew that they had to take part in the political process to choose and elect people who would go to war for them in the political arena. They had to come together. And as we've seen in the South, elected officials like your sheriff, your mayor, the city council, in places where Black people dominated, they knew that in order to get stuff changed, in order to make a way for them, they had to, start their own and elect their own leaders to, like I said, go to battle for them in a political arena. And us today, like, we've been bamboozled. We really have been bamboozled to the point where a lot of us, don't believe in politics. A lot of us don't get into politics. I know a lot of people say that religion, prevents them, or saying that because they're a certain religion or because they're religious that they shouldn't get into politics. But if you really look at it, I'm not going to get too biblical, but if you really look in the Bible and look in your Bible, there are scriptures in there that talk about electing men of God and, following men of God in the political sense. And like I said, I don't know the scriptures right offhand because I'm not a big Bible thumper. I don't just, regurgitate, scripture like that. But for anybody that feels different, like, I can look it up. You can send me a message or something, I can look it up. And I can really, get more deeper into it at another time. But like I said, it's even mentioned in the Bible. But we've been bamboozled when it comes to politics. We've been bamboozled. You know what I'm saying? Like, we've been bamboozled to the point where I'm not going to get into too much, but they convinced us to focus only on the presidency. They highlight the presidency to us and they push the presidency to us. But the president doesn't hold as much power as they make us think they are. And anybody that know politics, I'm not playing. It's a whole different ballgame. It's other more important people in the political arena that's in charge of, passing laws, getting laws passed, initiating laws, changing policy, and getting things done. But overall, like I said, we've gotten so caught up in the presidential race and, and being misled and miseducated on the whole system to the point where we don't utilize the system like they did back then. And I even hear people, who push the narrative, Black people who push the narrative that the vote doesn't count. They push the narrative that, our vote don't count. And that couldn't be further from the truth. That couldn't be further from the truth. And so that's, another value that we've gotten away from. And that's another value that led to our downfall. And it's leading to further downfall, because if not for them recognizing the power of politics and recognizing the power of the vote, like, they would have never accomplished the stuff that they accomplished. It is what it is. And for the people who say that the vote don't count, yeah, they're trying to constantly put us in a position where they, take away our strength in voting. They're constantly doing that by redistricting and they got to have so much stuff going on to where they're trying to limit the vote. But again, if the vote didn't count, why would they be doing it? Why would they be doing that? Even back then, if the vote didn't count, why do you think, people were sicking dogs on those people? People were beating those people. People were threatening those people to try to prevent them from exercising their right to vote. And once they exercised their right, civil rights, the laws got passed, the laws got changed. So that's one of the things that I think, that they value so much, and it helped them so much but we don't. And we don't exercise. I hate to bring it up, but I even heard people say that they was going to vote for Trump simply because they thought he was going to give us another stimulus check. And just like I said, if people can buy your vote, you don't value it as much as those people did back then, because a lot of those people lost their lives trying to vote. And for you to say, people today to say they would sell their vote for a stimulus check, that just shows you really, truly how little value we put on the vote. And like I said, the vote is so powerful, but we'll get into that, at a later show. We'll touch on that more at a later show. But like I said, another value that they had was resilience. Resilience, if in this sense, means active, collective resistance and adaptation that allows a community to thrive, build, and find joy while facing systemic oppression. Pushing. It, like I said, it allows a community to thrive, build, and find joy while still facing the problems that we face every day. And let's be real, we don't have it. A lot of us, I won't say none of us, but not enough of us has that resilience that they had. We lost it. We lost it. We got to the point where we just accept what it is, or we cry about, what the police won't do, or what, the city council won't do, and what everybody won't do. And at the end of the day, when it really gets down to it, these people work for us. These people are elected by us, or if not us, they're elected by somebody else to work for somebody else. But we don't take full advantage of it. We don't. You know what I'm saying? And we get down, and they just, like I say, they use social media to distract us. Just like right now, Trump is over there doing this thing and bombing, people and trying to take their oil. But a lot of us not aware of that, because they've given us a smoke screen. They use their media. They use their social media to distract us and keep us focused on, what's going on with our favorite stars, or what's going on with our favorite musicians or rappers or whatever, to keep us distracted from what's really going on in this world. They keep us distracted with, the local politics on what 50 Cent got going on, you know what I'm saying, in Shreveport, rather than the bigger picture. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of our downfalls. That's one of our downfalls. That's one of the values that our people had, and that helped our people overcome the obstacles, and what they were facing back then. And we don't possess it. Not enough of us possess it. Let me say that. Not enough of us possess it, because some of us do, but not enough of us. And the fourth, and I feel like the most major thing, is we don't value our faith. We don't place enough value in our faith. A lot of us don't even have faith. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not talking about, in just the godly sense. And even then, I've said before, a lot of us don't even know who God is. A lot of us just use the name and use the term because it sounds good, and that's what we heard before. But so many of us don't even know God. And I know a lot of these youngsters don't know God. And the reason why I say that is, if we truly knew God and we truly respected God, a lot of the actions that we partake in, we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't do it. And one of the main things I'll say is, nowadays you got people who match energy. And I'm going to just keep it real with you. If you're a person who matches energy, how can you really truly believe in God? Because God never said match energy and do people the way they do you. He said, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And people that treated you bad, turn the other cheek. He didn't tell you to treat them bad and match energy with them. He told you, to turn the other cheek. So you can't say that you match energy and treat people how they treat you. You can't say that and then turn around and say that you believe in God and you live by God's word. But faith, in this sense, is a communal engine for social change, survival, and liberation. It serves as the psychological and practical foundation that enables people to fight for a better future while surviving the problems that we're facing in the present. That's what faith means in this context. And I'm gonna keep it real. Like, I had to do my research in church because church back then was one of the most powerful organizations. That was one of the organizations that really rallied the people and unified the people. And I had to look at it then and see why it got to the point where it wasn't, serving the same purpose today. And I realized, through research, I realized that today's churches push a different message than they pushed back then. And if you look at it, with all these church and all these religious people and religious organizations, most of these churches and organizations, religious organizations today, push the personal prosperity and personal salvation message. You know what I'm saying? They these preachers nowadays are more motivational speakers, and they speak on personal prosperity, being prosperous. You know what I'm saying? And God wanting you to be prosperous, and your personal salvation, saving yourself. And that's cool, but that's not the same message that the churches were talking to back then. And like I said, I had to do my research to really find this out. But churches became the center of change and the center of progress and the center of unity back then, because those churches back then preached that we should take social and political action to combat systemic injustice. It pushed the message that we should take action, that we should be the catalyst of change, that we should take part in what needed to be done to change it. Real faith is not about just praying and waiting for God or anyone else to change things. That's not what it's about. Real faith calls believers to actively engage in social movements to change oppressive societal structures. It calls for action. That's why, I know what I'm saying, those political people, think about it. When you really do your research and you really do your history, politicians then, when they got out to try to win the vote for the people, one of the main places that they had to go was to these people churches. They had to get up, in these people churches where these people were united and these people carried weight with the vote to tell these people, hey, if you back me, if you elect me, this is what I'm going to do once I get in position. Now, just like I said, a lot of churches they say they're not religious because it messes with their money. It messes with their funding. You know what I'm saying? And that's the main thing about it now. Back then, the black churches weren't getting government funding. You know what I'm saying? They were funded by the people. They were funded by people in the community, by businesses in the community. That's what, and then it wasn't as many of them it is right now. You know what I'm saying? We know as black people, it's a church on every corner. It's a church on every corner. And it's causing more division than it is unity. It's causing more division. And like I said, our young people see this. Our young people see this division. Our young people see this message. And that's why so many of them are turning from the church. But like I said, they don't preach real action on them. They don't. They preach, be prosperous, and God wants you to be prosperous. And God, no, it says in the Bible, God wants you to elect and follow men of God, and those men are supposed to represent us and represent our needs and represent, what we need them to do, to look out for us, to step in that political arena and fight for us. And until we realize that, until we get back to start where we take action in politics and we really start, holding these, politicians accountable. Just like I said before, I don't mean to switch the subject, but just like I said before, as a Black community, we should be choosing our own candidates. We shouldn't even be letting people choose candidates for us. You know what I'm saying? And the candidates that's, running for office, you know what I'm saying? You have a race about to go down in Louisiana right now. Those people should be coming to you as Black voters. They should be coming to us as Black voters, explaining to us what they're going to do for us if we help put them in position. But we don't even have the organizations to demand that. And we wonder why other people, get people in position to work for them. That's because they are screening these people and they're getting these people in front of them, inviting these people to get in front of them to explain, hey, if you want our votes, you need to let us know how you're going to serve us when you get in position. You need to let us know what you're going to do for us when we get in position. And people say that's selfish. People say this, but people have been doing that forever. Other people, other races have been doing that forever. And that's just called politics. That's called politics. These presidents, these elected officials, they do not come out of their own pocket to run campaigns. They are, money is donated to them by their supporters. So they can put their people in position so they people can do the job that they need them to do. And it is what it is. We have to start looking at that for what it is. Not so they can get a stimulus check. So they can make moves to help them better their communities, for them to help them better, put them in situations where they can do better for themselves and future generations. But a question, do you think communities become stronger when people know and support one another? Talk to me. Let me know something. Let me know something. Let me know something. But again, just like I said, it's the mindset. And I'm going to give you an example of two different mindsets. Most of us, that came up during that time or came up during and after the crack epidemic, we developed the survival mindset. The survival mindset. And think about it. The survival mindset is the thought process of, I just need to get through the day. Or I don't have to have a plan. I just got to do what I got to do. Or I'll figure it out tomorrow. Or, like I said, one of the main things when I realized personally that I was dealing with a survival mindset. Somebody posed a question to me. Me and my uncle was talking about this earlier today. He said the same thing. Somebody posed a question, he said to him, and they asked him, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And like I said, he couldn't answer it. You know what I'm saying? And to go even further, when the person asked me, because just like I said, I'm a sane person, I always think. So when the person asked me, where do I see myself in 10 years back then? I think I was like 16 or 17 years old. And the person really asked me, and I was caught up in the streets then, but the person asked me, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And as crazy as it may sound, I guarantee you, if you ask a lot of these young Black men today, a lot of these young Black men that's growing up in impoverished communities, I guarantee if you ask them the same question, where do they see themselves in 10 years, a lot of them will give the same answer I gave when I was 15 or 16 years old. And I told the truth. I said, in 10 years from now, I'm going to more likely either be locked up in prison or dead. And that was a real answer. That was a real answer, but that was the foundation. That's when I realized that I was in the survival mindset, because I couldn't even see myself living past, 10 years. So many of my people had died. So many, my people were in prison. So I knew, like, I can't see success 10 years from now because I'm focused on right now. I'm focused on making sure I have it right now. But the flip side of that is the building mindset or the prosperity mindset. And like I said, the prosperity mindset allows you to ask the questions, where do I see myself in 10 years? What can I create? What can I pass on to my children when I'm gone and I'm not here anymore? What can I leave my children? Like, how do I develop skills to better support myself, to better, make more money? That's the thriving mindset. It allows you to see the future. It allows you to look towards the future and not be so caught up in the present that you can't afford to look that way. But like I told my uncle today, so many of us right now, like, honest and truly, we call it daydreaming to think about the future. And a person will tell you that you don't have time to daydream. You don't. But as youth, if you can't daydream and look forward to your future, what do you have to look forward to? What do you have to look forward to? And I'm gonna tell you, like, these youngsters now, people act like they don't understand them. I understand them. They can't think about the future because they so caught up in today. And if you so caught up in today, in this world that we live in today, to the point where you start daydreaming about the future, you could end up dead for not paying attention to your surroundings. And it's crazy. So I understand it, but that is why we are constantly doomed to repeat this cycle because of our mindset. Nothing can hold us down, more than our mindset. I posted on social media earlier before I did this show that people are saying with Shreveport, people are saying, oh, Shreveport has got bad. I'm going to move away. I tried all that. And just like I posted on social media a little earlier, you can move to another hood. You can move to another city. You can move to another state. You can move to another country. But if you take the same mindset with you, you're going to get the same results. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. It's already been proven. You can look at it. I've seen people move to Texas. I've seen people move to Atlanta. I've seen people with the same mindset they had in Shreveport, and they didn't accomplish much more there than they did. They struggled there just like they struggled here. Some of them even had to move back because they took that same mindset with it. And I guarantee you, look at it. You know what I'm saying? People say, oh, well, Shreveport is bad. No, Shreveport is not bad. The people in the mindset of the people in Shreveport is the cause of all of this. It's the mindset. And if we don't change the mindset, we're going to keep getting the same results. We're going to keep losing our kids. We're going to the system. Our daughters are going to keep getting pregnant out of wedlock and being single mothers and living off the state or getting these menial non-paying jobs. And we're going to continue to struggle. Our sons are going to continue to drop out at a high rate. They're going to continue to get out here in these streets. They're going to continue to get killed. And if the state or the city, Louisiana or Shreveport, have anything to do with it, like I said, now they're going to lock them up younger and younger. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to either end up in prison or they're going to end up in the graveyard. It is what it is. It's going to continue if we don't realize that our mindset is our biggest obstacle. It's not nothing that nobody else is doing. Because again, like I said, our ancestors coming out of slavery, they had it way worse. They had way more laws passed to stop them from accomplishing stuff. But their mindset, they focus, they drive, and their unity is what helped them to overcome. And if we don't develop it, we doomed. We are doomed. But serious question, have you ever caught yourself thinking in the survival mindset or survival mode? And if you have, think about, like, what caused it? What caused it? And what helped you move beyond it? And like I said, from personal experience, survival thinking developed in response to hardships. And on a personal note, I remember, you know what I'm saying, and thinking about it and evaluating myself and realizing this. You know, when my mom, you know, took us away from my pops, you know what I'm saying, we started experiencing hardship. We started experiencing real struggle. You know, that's when I first started realizing, you know what I'm saying, that our lights was getting turned off, our water was getting turned off, you know, we didn't really have enough to eat all the time. And that's when it started changing. My mindset started changing, because before then, like I said, I knew what I wanted to be when I was going to grow up. I was a straight A student. You know, I was doing everything I was supposed to do as a young man to excel, because that's what my community had taught me up to that point. But just like I said, right after she took us away from our dad, you know, we was going into the crack cocaine epidemic. It's right around the same time. So just like I said, I watched my mother struggle. I watched my mother, don't get me wrong, I watched my mother work 2 and 3 jobs to try to make it work. But it wasn't working. It wasn't working. So like I said, I saw the struggle. I remember the days that our water got turned off, our electric got turned off, because she had to choose which bill she paid. She had to try to keep a roof over her head. You know, she had to juggle all that on her own. And that's how I got into survival mode thinking, because my grandfather had taught me that you look out for your mother, you look out for your sisters. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I started developing that mentality where I had to do something. And think about it. This was before I was old enough to get a job. I wasn't old enough to get a job then. So, like I said, that was, you know, the legal age 16. That was well before I was able to get a job. And I ain't gonna lie, by the time I was old enough to get a job, I had already been introduced to the streets and all the illegal ways to get money, to the point where I wasn't even interested in no more in getting a job, because I had figured out how to get out there in the streets and make illegal money. And just like I said, just that quickly, the mindset changed. And just like I said, people will condone it just like I would have condoned it then. But I couldn't do that. When I thought about it later, I realized, okay, there were other kids, there were other young black men in the same position that you were in, but they made different choices. They made different decisions. And they went on to thrive, you know what I'm saying, and progress in life. But as soon as my mental started changing and I started adapting that survival mindset, it set me on a course to prison. It set me on a course to, you know, all the negativity that I've been through. It set me on that course. And I can't act like, you know what I'm saying, I don't recognize that today. And just like I said, I would have still been on that course right now. God is my witness. I would have still been in prison for the rest of my life, or I would have still been on something right then, right now, if I didn't realize that I had the wrong mindset. I had the wrong mindset. And just like I said, I'm going to keep it real. We don't like to talk about this, but a lot of us, you know, we can't do it on our own. A lot of us don't even realize that we have that survival mindset, because it's just a part of us. That's just how we are. That's just being black. That's just being hood. And that's why we'll forever be at the bottom. That's why we'll never be able to give our kids enough to crawl up out of it, enough to better themselves. We'll never be able to, because we don't even know we got a problem. We feel like we cool. It's just hood. It's just the hood thing to do. Like, we are who we are. But no, that wasn't who we were designed to be. That's not who we were designed to be. God didn't create us for this. Just like I said, things happen in our lives, whether it was, you know, poverty, whether it was mental abuse, whether it was emotional trauma, whatever it was, something happened in our lives as individuals to change us from the thriving mindset to the survival mindset. And I'm not going to lie, after my generation, a lot of us, when we turn to parents, our kids just got the worst of it. Our kids just got the worst of it. Our kids, you know what I'm saying? Our sons got the worst. You got to hustle for what you want. You got to do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? You just got to make it happen. You know what I'm saying? A lot of our girls got that. Well, you know, find you a man that can do something for you. You know, and you have to, you know what I'm saying? This and the third, and you know, don't bring no baby in my house because I'm not taking care of no baby. And you know, we got all the negativity and the trauma that our kids got. The negativity and the trauma that came from us and what we went through. So people act like they don't understand these youth today. Like, I don't know why, because we gave them that, which was nothing. We didn't have nothing to give them to develop, you know what I'm saying, the thriving mindset. We didn't have the resources to give them to help them get ahead in life. So what the hell else was they gonna do if they knew only what we taught them, which is our trauma and our pain and our survival mindset? What else were they gonna do? We act like we don't understand what they're going through, but what else are they going? What are they going to do? What else were they going to do? But again, think about a neighborhood that you admire. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, with a real mentality, think about the neighborhood you admire. What makes it successful? You know, and to me, things come to mind like families involved with their children, you know, good schools, you know, good, strong businesses owned by people who live in the community and support the community, you know, mentors, you know, who try to teach our kids a better way, try to show us a better way, the neighborhoods that are clean, you know, neighborhood that have good, strong churches and good, strong civic organizations, you know, people who volunteer in the community. You know, that's what I think about when I think about good neighborhoods. But why couldn't more communities build more of these strengths in their own neighborhood? Why? And this is not about pretending that every neighborhood is the same or every neighborhood is dealing with the same problems, but generally they are. There aren't too many, you know what I'm saying, like prominent Black communities where, you know, people are proud or people look up to those communities or those neighborhoods. It's not. But that is exactly, you know what I'm saying, why I, you know what I'm saying, took it upon myself to start the prosperity movement. The prosperity movement exists to help people grow from surviving and overcoming that surviving mindset to developing a thriving mindset, to becoming builders, to becoming leaders, to becoming mentors and examples of what it is to be strong and Black. And through coaching, through my courses, self-help courses, through workbooks, through community workshops, speaking engagements, and leadership training, and just it's a whole package of stuff that basically revolves around changing our mindset, reshaping our mindset. My goal is to help people develop the mindset and the practical skills to improve their own lives and contribute positively to their families and the communities, because that's what we're going to have to do to change this around. That's what we're going to have to do to make it right. It's about helping people think intentionally, discover purpose, build discipline, and take meaningful action. That's what it's mainly about. Getting your mind right and then helping the next person do the same thing. Getting your plan together and start executing your plan and then helping the next person do the same thing. But again, I don't do this to inspire. Don't be inspired. Leave committed. Leave this episode. When you leave here, when you turn this episode off, when you turn this video off, leave committed. This week, I want to challenge people to do one of these things. Number one, read. Read a good book. Read a good book. Number one. Number two, save a small amount of money. Start saving. And no matter how much it is, start saving. Start putting some money up. Number two, Support a local business. I always push that. Support a local business. Next, if you can, mentor or encourage one young person. Only one. Mentor or encourage one young person. Call a family member you've been avoiding. Reach out. Try to make amends with a family member, because we all we got. And write down 3 goals for the next 90 days and immediately start taking steps to working toward achieving those goals. Don't just write them down. Don't just do the New Year's resolution thing. Start taking conscious steps toward achieving those goals too. Or attend a community meeting, attend a church event, or volunteer. Volunteer. Commit to something. Do something. Take a step. Take a step. Accountability starts with saying it out loud. Like, make it happen. Take action. But hey, man, tonight, like I said, it's not about saying one thing causes every problem. That's not what it's about. It was about recognizing something powerful. Communities become stronger when people intentionally invest in themselves and one another. And it starts with the mindset. It starts with changing the mindset. My mission, my personal mission through the prosperity movement, is to help people build that foundation through education, through coaching, through workshops, and conversations like this one. That's why I do this. But like I said, if tonight's discussion challenged you, share it with somebody else. Subscribe to the channel and join us every Thursday night, because I try to do this every Thursday night. And hey, if your church, school, social group, nonprofit organization, business, community organization, if anybody is looking for a speaker or a workshop on mindset, changing your mindset, workshops on leadership, workshops on identifying your purpose, personal development, like, I would be honored to partner with you. I would be honored. We have to work together for change. And I'm open to working with anybody that's serious and anybody that's willing to commit and ready to commit to change. Personal change, changes in our neighborhoods, changes in our communities, changes in our organizations. But again, I want to leave you with a question. If every person that watches this video committed to becoming 1% better every day and help another person do the same thing, what would our communities look like 10 years from now? Think about that. If we all committed to grow 1% daily, and we committed to help somebody else do the same thing, what would our neighborhoods, what would we look like 10 years from now? But think about it. Think about that. I'm Mr. O'Neal. Like I said, this has been the P.R.O.S.P.E.R.I.T.Y Perspective. Until next week, I want everybody to keep growing, keep learning, keep building. God bless everybody, and good night. Y'all have a good one.